This presentation is for teachers that have some background teaching improv in the classroom. It builds upon that knowledge by providing best practices and advice from improv teachers and performers that have moved the improv experience to a digital platform. As with teaching improv in the classroom setting, it is a good idea when teaching improv digitally to start with simple games which emphasize physical and verbal communication. The major difference with digital improv is getting the students to experience and explore their new space, which now involves the camera. Starting with simple games, which explore stage directions in this new context, can help to get the students acclimated to using the framed shot as part of how they communicate. A simple Simon Says style game with stage directions in front of the camera is a good starting place. Once the class begins to see what choral movement can look like in this setup, transitioning into a group mirror exercise can help to introduce concepts like sharing, leadership, and control, and even the very beginnings of affirmations of what other performers are bringing to the table. This is critical for later improv concepts like yes and. Once an initial game has been introduced, it is suggested that students are introduced to your classroom norms and best practices for improv. These are likely to look different from classroom to classroom. But the following are a series of suggested best practices from several sources, including EDTA's webinar on digital improv and the Essential Theater's best practices for Zoom performance. Ask participants to mute their microphones and place the camera into gallery or grid mode. Encourage participants to arrange their camera to a standing position. Seated performance is difficult even for the most experienced actors. Getting actors on their feet ensure that they will remain physical as well as vocal. Review the basic rules of improv. Pick strong students to go first for new games, so that the first round serves as a model for improv strategies. Pass the role of leader where applicable by using people's names from the screen. Sending people out of the room. When playing a game where one participant cannot listen to what others are saying, have them turn their volume all the way down. To get them back, have all participants get their attention by waving to them. Or simply use the chat. To get strong audience suggestions, it is helpful sometimes to cue participants with Mad Lib style phrasing. For example, I never thought I'd come home to blank, or we were hiking in the beautiful blank, or we're in a blank factory. Chat function is also very helpful for this purpose. It is important in the digital setting as well as in the live setting to set the expectations of your audience. In improv, there's often a blurring of the hard lines between audience and performer interaction. This is particularly true in the classroom, where audience often joins in the performance. All participants, audience, and performers should be encouraged to provide expressive, supportive feedback. Digital platforms can feel distant and isolating. Encourage laughter and big smiles to replace the immediate feedback of hearing laughter and clapping in face-to-face performance. This will not only help encourage the actors, but it will also boost the energy of the games. Another consideration for the digital setting is reminding students about the appropriate behavior for engaging in improv. Siblings, parents, and anyone of any age may be in the audience just off screen. Things to avoid in general. Violence and poor language are the least creative solutions to any problem. Bathroom and body fluid humor often have no place in the educational improv setting. Saying no, not the word no, but rather rejecting the proposals or premises presented by a scene partner. Inside jokes. These often alienate those not in the know. This has the opposite of the team-building effect classrooms are often looking for when engaging in improv games and activities. Embrace failure early. When a student makes a mistake, particularly in one of these early games, jump at the opportunity for the student to embrace the failure. A circus bow is a great way to start this classroom habit. This is a three-part practice. The student that made the mistake takes a large bow and proudly proclaims, "I have made a mistake." The rest of the class acknowledges this by clapping and cheering for the person. This activity provides the following: audible kindness, encouragement, support, approval, and most importantly, an understanding of the purpose of the game. It's not about winning, it's about playing together. Sometimes making the mistake is the most entertaining portion of the game itself. Play all games with students. Be sure you fail early on. Play with the abandonment of a 5-year-old. This is good advice for students as well. Another group game that's good for a digital platform for all age ranges is called King Frog. Students are set to gallery view. One student is King Frog. His symbol is a simple clap, similar to the one used in a zip-zap-zop style game. Each of the other students select an animal with a movement that's indicative of that animal. For example, an elephant might make a trunk movement with the arm. A rabbit might make bunny ears over the head. The penguin might waddle 3 steps forward. Whatever the animal is, the movement should be kept simple. This process is continued until all students have a separate animal. King Frog will begin the conversation by making the King Frog gesture and then the gesture of another animal. The animal referenced will acknowledge by repeating their own gesture and then the gesture of another. A good practice is to go through all of the animals at least once before repeating or starting the competitive aspect of the game. Some teachers like to have an element of elimination. In this setting, if you make a mistake 2 or 3 times, then you are removed from the game. This makes it more complicated and speeds up the process for the others. If the class is too large to be seen in gallery view, the same game can be played in speaker mode. The difference here is that each animal will need to make a noise or say, "Hey," prior to starting their physical communication. In addition to playing all of the games with students to build trust, it is also important to take the time to discuss the games, or at least the individual experience of the games. A great deal of theater education is game-based. This is due to the fact that games have a great deal in common with theater. There are made-up rules, a special ordering of time, space, objects and goals for participants, and so on. Often, we need to remind students to think about the game after the fact, to encourage that introspective awareness that is critical for the actor's process. One of the ways of achieving this is with journaling. Many teachers already use journaling in acting classes, but it can be equally useful for something as seemingly unregulated as theater games and improv. The journals don't need to be complicated to be effective. They can be used at any age range. Even a simple cataloging of what the actor did, how they felt, or what they were surprised by will start the process of metacognition and performance. Timeliness versus readiness. One of the biggest roadblocks to beginning improvers is the fear of being rejected or not having the right response. Students sometimes become overly concerned with planning, and that concern about saying the right thing will often cause students to freeze and not act. But we participate in a timely fashion all the time. Conversations are not planned, and the responses are not prepared and read. They are simply timely and based on addressing a specific goal or need. The following game is a great way to embrace the acceptance of others and to hear your own ideas embraced and built upon. Yes, let's. One player will say, "Let's blank," filling in what he or she wants to do, and then start actually doing the task. The rest of the audience will say, "Yes, let's," and engage in the same task. This game encourages students to propose new ideas, to engage in choral affirmation, and to function as a collective. Students are more likely to be comfortable with making suggestions when they know the focus is on them only for a few moments. Even with this positively structured game, it's often difficult to get students to volunteer. For this reason, it might be a good idea to try games that have a progressive order to them. In the classroom, we can establish order by using a circle or simply moving in turns to the left or right. Some students are more likely to act and provide a suggestion out of obligation of it being their turn when they might not jump in if it's simply up for grabs for anyone. Providing your students with a numbered order in the digital platform can function the same way. You can number or sequentially order your students verbally. You could have your students rename themselves with their number in the screen as well. For example, number 1, Emily. Have the students repeat the order. Play a sequential game using that order. Yes, let's can be done in this manner. Another good game for the digital world that is temporary for the individual and encourages a timely participation is the one-word story. The following description of one-word story comes from the Improv Encyclopedia. This is an exercise to train group narrative. All players sit in a circle, or, in the digital platform, all players have a sequential order. We're going to tell a story one word at a time. Each player provides one word of a sentence. The end of a sentence can be indicated by a player saying period, although that is not necessary. Once these games have been played in a sequential manner successfully, you can experiment with removing the sequence and letting the students jump in whenever they want to while still maintaining the objectives of the game. This game is also good for introducing another key element of improv, establishing a beginning, middle, and end. The next step for more experienced students might be to remove the concept of choice or preparation entirely with another story game like Story, Story, Die or Orchestrated Story. This description of Story, Story, Die comes from the Improv Encyclopedia. Players form a line on the stage, a title for the story, and the story is generated obtaining information from the audience. The MC starts the game by pointing to a player who needs to start telling the story. At any point in time, the MC can switch to another player who needs to continue the story flawlessly, even if the switch happened in the middle of a sentence or even in the middle of a word. Players that hesitate or whose sentences are not grammatically correct or don't make sense are eliminated from the game. The audience celebrates much like in the circus bow with yelling die. Often in the classroom setting, the player gets to choose some manner of elaborate death. The last player left ends the story. Yes and is of course a key aspect of any improv. Scenes will not work if partners overtly reject the suggestions of others. It is also important for partners to add to suggestions in order to progress the story. There are some potential pitfalls to be wary of. Beware the wicked stepsisters of yes and. These are yes but and yes or. These responses often seem like they are effective in that they embrace the existence of the partner's proposed narrative, but they do not build on it. They either negate the usefulness or sidestep it completely. This is a fast way to make the scene or game not about the group, but about one person's personal control. This type of activity should be avoided at all costs. There are 2 full improv units in the Georgia Department of Education's TRL, or Teacher Resource Links. One is located in Fundamentals of Theater. The other is in Acting 1. The basic setup for both of these units involve an introduction to improv, and then a series of lessons based on certain types of games. These games are broken down into guessing games, skill games, and scene games. The final unit for both of these courses is focused on performance, or expanding the student's ability to use multiple games and improv skills. In the Fundamentals of Theater class, the unit culminates in a theater sports style presentation. In the Fundamentals of Theater class, the unit culminates with a theater sports style presentation. In the acting class, the unit culminates with a long-form style of improv called Character Prom. For additional questions, please contact the Fine Arts team, Jessica Booth, Paul McLean, Casey Hall.